Luther King Jr. Community Celebration. I'm Michael Chuck, Secretary of the Charlottesville Clergy Collective, and I have the honor of welcoming you to this celebration via live stream and video recording on YouTube. Now, we had originally hoped that we could gather in person today, but alas, it was not to be. We are planning to hold a second in-person event at the Ting Pavilion on the 10th of April at 3 p.m. But for now, I invite your attention and intention to celebrate and commemorate the work, life, and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So why are we here today? We are here today because the work of Dr. King is not finished. We are here because of the urgency of creating a beloved community. Indeed, we have so far to go in achieving equity, inclusion, and belonging in all sectors of society. This past year, we have seen a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. We have witnessed the banning of books that teach the history of racial oppression in the United States. We are witnessing the erosion of voting rights for African Americans and other minorities. There is much work to be done. And for so long, Dr. King's message and work have been ignored and dismissed. In fact, when Dr. King visited Charlottesville in 1963, he received no greeting or welcome from our local government or university officials. And his speech failed to fill Cabell Hall Auditorium. And we cannot forget that the entirety of his 39 years that King lived and breathed, there was not a single day when the majority of white Americans approved of him. Today, even as it is fashionable for people to invoke the name and memory of Dr. King, his actual work and words are sanitized and domesticated so that they are more palatable for white consumption. Therefore, it is important for us now more than ever to not only remember, but also to reckon and to wrestle with Dr. King's prophetic message to overcome the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism that still ravage our land. Will you pray with me? O God, who is known by many names, we gathered this afternoon to remember and celebrate the work, life, and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We also come to acknowledge and encourage those who carry on Dr. King's spirit and work today. And as we listen and learn, may your power invigorate our resolve to take up Dr. King's cause. As we sing and sway, may your spirit activate our collective will to talk, walk, and work in further bending the arc of justice toward the beloved community. O Holy One, hear our prayer. Amen.
Good afternoon. I'm Kay Slaughter, a member of the Planning Committee for today's 37th Annual Martin Luther King Jr. Community Celebration. As Michael said, this is part A of our commemoration. On April 10, we hope to meet in person at the Pavilion to recognize the 2022 recipient of the Martin Luther King Community Award and the essay contest winners. And also, of course, enjoy more music and being together as a community. On your screen, you should see a listing of some of the past award winners and honorees. Anyone can nominate a person who's exemplified Dr. King's goals by contacting a member of the committee or mailing a nomination to the MLK Committee, care of Mount Zion. Now, I'm pleased to introduce the moderator of our panel discussing the urgency of creating the beloved community. Nancy O'Brien was the first woman to be selected as Charlottesville mayor in 1976. After her years on council, Nancy continued to be active in her neighborhood, and she also served on 2 state boards, the Department of Housing and Community Development and the State Housing and Development Authority. I'll hand it over to Nancy now for the panel discussion.
Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Sandy Hook, and Parkland, movie theaters, churches, synagogues, riots, and assassinations. Each event has sent this country reeling. In response, task forces were created, studies done, reports filed, public hearings held, some actions taken, some worked, some didn't. Yet these these violent events continue to take place. Charlottesville was invaded first by the KKK and then by the August mob. Many governments are engulfed with war with their own people. Violent actions continue to take place around the globe. Dr. King had a dream that we could live together in peace with mutual respect, without hunger or poverty, in a beloved community. We hope today's conversation will help us move in that direction. As the Beatles sang, all you need is love. Love is all you need. Dr. King believed love could make it happen. I have the pleasure of serving on this panel, of actually moderating it, with the best panel I've ever been in contact with. So I really appreciate you all being here, and I know we'll have a good, vigorous conversation. We have with us Sarad Davenport, who is an educator and publisher and founder of the City of Promise, and currently starring in Pipeline at Live Arts. And we have Cameron Webb, a UVA Medical Center hospitalist and a member of the President Biden's White House COVID-19 response team focused on equity. He was also a congressional candidate. And we have Bitsy Waters, also a former mayor of Charlottesville, whose career has been devoted to facilitating community dialogues on a host of issues. We'll start off with everyone telling you a little bit about how they got here, what they saw, and how it's changed since they've arrived. I wonder, Sarad, if you could kick that off for us.
Sure, I'll make a minor edit to my bio. I wasn't the founder of City of Promise, I was the founding director. So it was a community effort. In fact, it came out of the dialogue on race initially. So,
okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine, it's fine. Semantics, but we won't make it right. But I was born and raised in Charlottesville, so I have a unique perspective of someone who didn't kind of come to Charlottesville, and I have generations of folks who have, either lived in Charlottesville or in close proximity to Charlottesville. So I have a little history. I think that, I grew up, I was born in the late 70s. Shout out to the 70s babies. But I grew up in the late 70s, and I feel like our generation kind of served as a bridge between those who kind of lived through the civil rights struggle and the children of that era. And we were more, kind of the experimentation to see if this thing was going to work after early attempts at integration. And I think that, for me, growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was somewhat of what we felt like a golden time for us. I thought that in Charlottesville, some things were working, at least we thought they were, especially on the surface, things were working. We got along at school. We didn't have some of the baggage of previous generational struggles, so we didn't know the kind of undertones that were going on. And I think for us, athletics were a thing that brought us together as a community. And we didn't necessarily see some of the struggles. I think that the things that we did struggle with at that time was there was a substance abuse epidemic in late 80s, early 90s with crack cocaine, which destabilized families, and a lot of families struggled in that particular way. And also, those are the things that we kind of struggle with in my generation. I think that at this point in time, we're kind of having to translate across generations. I think we're right kind of the bridge, and we're trying to understand it all ourselves, these things that we thought were true, that have unraveled before our eyes over the last few years, and really trying to recognize that what we thought might have been true might not have been true, and we might not have made as much progress as we thought we did. And how do we deal with that, and how do we make it real and work together, but also hold our community, our leaders, and each other accountable?
Sure. I grew up in Massachusetts, but moved to Charlottesville in 1971 when my husband came to work at UVA. We had been in Atlanta for him to get his PhD. So I was a young person in my 20s, inspired by Dr. King and the civil rights energy we've been part of in Atlanta. And Charlottesville was a small town then compared to today, and the university and the community were quite separate places. But there were strong voices for civil rights here. You saw the pictures of many of them on the screen. I actually have them on my paper. Drury Brown, Alicia Lugo, Priscilla Whiting, Paul Gaston, Eugene Williams, and many others. And there was, at that time, which is before your golden phase, Sarad, there was a real feeling of hope that we could build on the work of Dr. King and his predecessors and his colleagues, and the laws and awakenings of the 60s, which were another painful, confusing time where you tried to figure out, was something good going to come out of this? And so I was excited to become part of this, and I feel many of us worked very hard for many decades to try to continue to make progress, but I think the last few years have been sobering, and we've realized that yes, we have made progress, but we have a long way to go, and there were many things we were blind to and are blind to that need changing. So that's where I am today.
Well, for me, I'm from Spotsylvania County, so I grew up about an hour from here, and I first came to Charlottesville in around 1993 when my mom, a teacher, came to the university to do some graduate coursework. And coming to Charlottesville as a 10-year-old from Spotsylvania County, I said all the time, I was coming to the big city, you know. And a couple years later, my oldest sister came here for college, and it was always a treat to come to Charlottesville. Again, we were going to that university, and then several years after that, I came to UVA to begin my own studies. And I remember when I got here, again, feeling like this was a much larger community than I'd ever seen, but also a much more diverse community than I'd ever seen, which was really an interesting experience, and not at all the experience of a lot of my friends, other Black or African American students who were at the university at that time. For them, it was a change in a different direction in terms of diversity. But I found very quickly that the university dynamic was often one that was painful and filled with violence of its own as a Black student at the University of Virginia. We had several experiences during my time here from 2001 to 2005 that made us feel like the university wasn't truly our home. And where did we look? Well, we looked to the folks who often worked at the university, who made it feel like a safe space to us, made it feel like a comfortable place for us. And then also to the folks who we socialized with. I mean, I played a lot of basketball here in Charlottesville in the community because it felt more like a place that felt like home. I remember meeting Snake Banks. I remember I was talking to Sarad about this the other day, meeting Snake and playing with him and bringing groups of folks together to play basketball. Those sorts of things really created a sense of true community for me. And you know, I left Charlottesville with really a different sense. I understood there was a town and gown dynamic here, but really felt more like the broader community was where I belonged. And so when my wife and I came back, very different people, years later to join faculty, we made a conscious decision to come back and be integrated and a part of the community here in Charlottesville and not the university bubble. And yes, there have been some things that have shifted and changed to kind of tie those two communities together a little bit more than it used to be. But the fact remains that you have to be intercalated, really tied into this community if you want to break down a lot of those walls. And so that's what my experience was. I'll end by saying I was eager to come back to Charlottesville and to be a part of this community, even though my contemporaries from UVA said, "Are you sure you want to come back?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I said, you know, it's where I want to be. It's where we want to be as a family. Well, I happened to move back the week of the events of August 11th and 12th. And I think that was hard for us. And my friends texted again and said, "Are you sure you want to go back?" But as I say all the time, I guess as Mordecai said to Esther, you know, you're called for such a time as this. We're supposed to be in a community like this at a time like this, and glad to do so.
Right, well, we are glad to have the three of you here, certainly. As you look at where we are now, which is why I read what I read at the beginning, how do you feel about the potential of where we are? So I think that potential is the word I want to use there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in here. I think that we have to begin to imagine. I thought about this today. We have to begin to imagine again. I think sometimes we get stuck on Dr. King's dream, and I think that we need to recognize it, but we have to imagine again in America. And we have to imagine again in Charlottesville and ideate and think about what are the possibilities of us reshaping and reforming how our community and society can look and be functional and more healthy for more people instead of it being exclusive. And I think that we need to spend that time and really think about that. Like, what would it look like if we were equitable in the way that we hired people? What would it look like if we paid people based on their abilities and not, we have these fragmented payment scales where people, if they come in a certain demographic, then they get paid less in the aggregate. It's just, and then they can't live here, right? So I think that we have to imagine a world where we can really recognize the humanity in all people and see people at a level instead of, kind of our condescending gaze that you can often kind of feel in Charlottesville. We have to be able to see people really where they are and as equal and human.
Well, just building off that, I think that's absolutely right, but it's also been so abstract for people sometimes. Because in your bubble, so many people, even here in this community, see things and they say things are pretty good, and I recognize the people across from me, and I see the people across from me, and I think that when I think about looking toward the future, I think about the fact that you can't let a crisis go to waste. I think about the fact that this COVID-19 pandemic showed us something that we can't look away from. It showed us that there were people who were hurting, who were struggling, not because the virus chose them, but because the community left them behind for so long that the virus exploited those weaknesses. I remember coming to this church to do testing in this parking lot at the very beginning of this pandemic, recognizing that people, just because of the cracks in our access to healthcare, had nowhere else to go. That has been a theme throughout this entire pandemic. And yes, there's been a lot of mutual aid in this community, but mutual aid alone will not make this work in this community. And so I think we look at this moment and we say, this ain't right, and you just have to say that in as plain a language as you can, and then say, I'm not gonna look away from what I saw for these last 2 years, and instead, I'm going to focus on what we can do to terraform this environment to create a space that truly does allow opportunity for everybody. Because you can talk about it, but this is a moment where we have to be about it.
I completely agree with you, Cameron, actually with both of you. I do think the way to put a positive focus on this, and I've tried to talk this way with people in my close community too, is to see it as an opportunity. It's been painful for, I think, almost everybody. It's been confusing, and I think that what we have here is an opportunity to put a personal and put a different lens, as people have said, an equity lens on our personal and public decisions. And if we do that with just about everything, Cameron, whether it's health, whether it's housing, whether it's how we do business, whether it's minimum wage. I mean, so many of the things that have been mentioned, the changes in the judicial system, our current zoning, and what its implications for affordable housing. So for me, that is the plus of the moment we're in. But I do think it requires all of us to stay on it, because I think what you were saying, Sarat, is we did it, and we felt good about the changes that have been made and were important, but then you look away and you go in your immediate world. So I think to keep our eyes on the prize, and in everything we do, it is a very important part of where we are today.
I think for me, just to add on to what has been said, is that a couple of indicators for me are like the wealth gap, and then the health disparity, right? So those are two indicators that I see. I'm watching those because I know that, and I'm watching education because I know that those indicators are the ones that are going to shift life outcomes generationally. And if we're not moving systems and structures to change those things and those life outcomes for those indicators, then are we really doing the work? Or are we just, saying things that make people feel good and not really doing the tough work of, dealing with these structures and systems that affect life outcomes? And are we courageous enough to say that there will be shifts, right, if we do the right thing? And no one should be afraid of that if we do the right thing. Why are we afraid to do the right thing? Is a question that I have to ask.
Well, and again, we could stay on this conversation for days, right? I mean, again, if we're going to invoke Dr. King, I think, we want to do that thoughtfully at all times. And here, what you just described is spot on. When you think about wealth gaps, when you think about, the challenges with housing, with education, with healthcare, that doesn't just affect the individual. And I think that individualistic society sometimes is what puts us at a disadvantage, right? And Dr. King said we're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Mm-hmm. Dr. King said we're tied in a single garment of destiny. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, to look at the pandemic, people didn't always want to believe that. But right now, they're recognizing as goes any part of our community, so goes our society. And so when you talk about eliminating or addressing some of these inequities, they are mission critical for all aspects of our society. So for Charlottesville, it's mission critical for Charlottesville at a time when we're already, we were coming out of all of the issues of, 2017. We were coming out of, the challenges that we've had across the board, the ongoing dynamics with the university, the ongoing dynamics with challenges with housing and with zoning and all those different things. And then you drop a pandemic on top of that, And so I think that we really have to look at this moment and say, we don't survive this. We don't make it through this. We don't thrive through this unless we do it together. That's what the future has to look like. That's what that vision must be. And if you keep an individualistic mentality toward it, you will see segments of society thrive, but you won't see the community, the beloved community thrive.
Well, I'd like to go back to your word generational responsibilities, Surad, because I think that we have much work to do learning how to expand our mutually respectful forums for communicating across races, across generations. I feel that that is something that we have in all of the stress of the last few years. I feel we have lost a good bit of that, and I believe, I don't know, but I believe Dr. King would think that we do have to be able to speak in a respectful and trustful way with each other to move all of us together, closer together. I think it means for me, I'm clearly Nancy and I, but at the older end of this, and we need to nurture new generations of leaders who are black and white and brown, and we need our bridge people between generations, but hopefully we also hang on to those of us who did the best we could, but also it's time for us to move aside. So I think I look to, and this is a community that has a lot of forums, but I think that we could stand to strengthen them. I think the African American Heritage Center is a great addition to the community in terms of just its existence, the programming it offers, introducing people to new ideas. But I think we need to take that lens and look for opportunities. And then I hope that we will have a large enough number of us who really believe in this notion of intergenerational, trustful communication. Even we can disagree, but we need to be able to move on, because my feeling is if we can't do that, it is going to be very hard to do all of the things we need to do to deal with the achievement gap, with the lack of generational wealth, everything we've named, health. Yeah. We've got to be one community. We've got to be able to talk to each other.
Yeah, I think that we certainly need to focus on an intergenerational dialogue. That's the way I call it. There needs to always be an intergenerational dialogue. I think that is, part of certainly my culture around, the stories that get passed down. That's what weaves us together and keeps us strong when we're having that intergenerational dialogue all the time. I do think that we don't necessarily have to speak in ways that are always palatable, though, right? Yeah. Because sometimes I don't think that tension is the absence of progress. In fact, I think that innovation sometimes comes out of tension. And I think that, we have to be thoughtful about requiring decorum at all times, because, you know, I think if we talk about these inequities, you have to, these things are pent up in people's bodies for years and generations, and things that they didn't really have the power to say or do, and it has to come out. And sometimes it may not always be palatable, but inevitably people will digest them and they will be fine. But we sometimes have to go through those moments of tension in order to get to real progress. So I'm often not afraid of the tension or sometimes what seems like a lack of decorum, because I think sometimes that is what leads to progress. And I certainly think Dr. King would think that, right? Creating that discomfort in order to move to a place where we have a true sense of peace and justice, and not like a false sense of justice.
Well, and what's radical is a matter of context. You know, it was radical, or it was impolite, or it was strange for folks to see Rosa Parks at the front of a bus. It was impolite for Black students in Greensboro, North Carolina, to sit at a table, at a counter, right? It was breaking social norms, and it was doing so in a way that was unpalatable. And I know that's actually, I know that's not your point. Your point was actually that, you know, we want to have, you know, really productive conversations. We want to find ways that when we have dialogue, when we have conflict, we're able to continue to move forward together. Yes. And I think that's really the key. But I think that for young folks, you know, a lot of times, and I find myself, now that I'm moving out of that young folks category, you know, I find myself really having to stop and not tell them how to do things, you know, but just say, you push and press for change in the way that you see fit, because young people have been the change in our society that we've always needed. And my job is to open doors. My job is to open ears and keep that space and hold that space as you run through that door. Because people held doors for me to run through, and that's what progress looked like. So I think I agree with, you know, the two comments I think are synergistic. And I think in a way that ultimately, if we continue to invite the younger folks in our society to be bold, to be pertinacious, to be outspoken, to be radical in a way that's productive for our communities and our society, we'll continue to see the kind of change that we built upon throughout the 20th century. I always say we need to make that kind of change for the 21st century. And I ask myself, what does that look like? What does that future look like, and what are the bold risks that I need to be taking today? At 38 years old, Dr. King was 39 when he died. What bold risks should I be taking today to help invite that future?
Yeah, and I want to, like, you know, I don't want to, you know, I'm not encouraging people to just go tear the house down, right? You know, I mean, I think that, you know, we do move forward, but I have to remind myself sometimes that some people require process, even if I know the answer. It doesn't matter that I know the answer or the final destination, because the process matters, how we get there, and allowing people to move. And I know, like, serving on boards and things like that, it's like sometimes I'm the director, I'm the chair of the board. I know the answer. I know where we're going to get. But the people that are a part of that that board or that organization you have to allow people to get to the place. And we can't force them because we already know the answer, even if we know the answer.
All I will add to that is that my strongest wish is that personal attacks not be part of discomfort and sort of the need to be uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with the need to be uncomfortable, but I think that personal respect, I hope, is part of how we move forward. But I don't know how much time we have, Nancy, but I just wanted to throw an idea out there to say that as we try to move forward together, because I know everybody's discouraged about COVID, people are actually discouraged, I think, overall in many ways, because take an area like voting rights, where many of us celebrated what we thought were major accomplishments that would be with us for life, and there are others I can think of, and we're losing ground. But I think to counterbalance that, we also need to keep in mind as we move forward to celebrate successes. Mm-hmm. And we are having a surge of affordable housing success in the rebuilding and expansion of our public housing, in what Habitat is doing out in Southwood. one of my most beloved community experiences was the opening of Jefferson School. I happened to work for almost 20 years with a team of other people to make that happen. And the day that those doors opened was a beloved community day for me, with the people who came flooding in and the spirit and feeling of it. I think removing the statues, reclaiming our public spaces, having the new memorial at the university. So I would like to just make sure that we celebrate when we have successes, and maybe if we close that achievement gap, or maybe. So it's just, I'm not trying to wrap it up, but I did think that's an important part of coming together and saying, we did it.
And be pleased with that.
And it's benefiting everyone.
Keep our minds on the bigger picture as well, because we have seen so much actually accomplished, but we sometimes stop at accomplishing that. So we desegregated the schools and we sort of stopped. And we changed this law and we changed that law and we stopped. Somehow we were tired maybe at the end of that fight. And so part of it is keeping our energy going forward. One big thing that people need to learn, we all need to learn, and that is to listen, because we can't have a dialogue if we don't listen to each other and be able to say, that hurt. We got to look at that hurt, because you might not know that that's what you've done to someone, is hurt them. So because I think that, and this place, this town, I think it wins prizes on getting forums together. I mean, I participated in 7 before it took off permanently, when that was the last one, when we hired a staff person. And the difference was having a staff person or not having a staff person. So anyway, I think you've really been touching on some important things. And the question is, how do you get that out there? You know, we can sit here and talk, and we are, and it's a wonderful conversation. But where do we take it from here? Or where do we hope someone else might pick it up and take it?
I'll start, and then I think that we have to be intentional about the discussions and the dialogue and be able to exist within the tension. I think sometimes we try to escape the tension, but I think if we're intentional about those dialogues, I know that's everything that I do, is working with people who are not like me, who don't come from where I come from, who don't have the same background as I do, and being intentional about that. And I think that, you know, not only do, you know, certain segments have to do, but we all have to do it. And to be in those uncomfortable places and be intentional about having those conversations and taking the posture of listening and having humility in those discussions, I think that'll go a long way.
I think we're lucky, Nancy. I think it is happening in a lot of places
Right.
in this community, and I think we can ourselves try to advance it and try to get everybody we know to advance it and try to be in the spirit you described, Sarad. So I think this is a community that's ripe for this if we just keep saying this is an opportunity we can't pass up. So let's stay on
Right.
it
I think
and see what we can do.
every crisis should not go to waste. I think that if we're going to take one sentence out of this, I think that's a good one to take with us.
Well, you know, they used to say at the church where I grew up, you know, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So you listen twice as much as you talk. And I think that notion is really here and really helpful. And I think part of how is that so often in some of these spaces we're listening because we're prepared to answer, we're prepared to respond, we're prepared to rebut, right? But instead, I think that our purpose for listening needs to shift. It needs to be co-creation. It needs to be collective action, right? And I think those are things that are powerful. You know, when you talked about personal attacks, I was triggered because I just ran for Congress, so I know a thing about personal attacks. But I think but I think that even beyond that, I think about the work that I'm doing now in the White House. I think about how people come to us, right? And the things that are the most powerful, people say, well, what will actually move the agenda? The things that are the most powerful are communities saying, this is the example of what we accomplished in Charlottesville. Not, you should do this or you should do that. It's like, this is what we've done. Everywhere should have what we've done in Charlottesville. Far and away. Those are the most powerful conversations that we have. Those are the things that create new policy. because I think anything else is what is it, a plan without a goal is but a wish, right? And that idea, anything else is falling short of that. So it's exciting when we say, well, what's the collective action we can take here? What can we accomplish together through listening, through co-creating, that is going to be a model for other spaces? And, I work at the university with the Equity Center that, Professor Dana Matthews started here, but as the work has continued, and the idea has always been, how do we create a new dynamic? Eliminate that town and gown phenomenon, but instead become a space of true collaboration. And that was meant to be a model for the country, and that's the kind of thing we need to be looking to do. This is a special place. And our ability to achieve in such a special place is going to resonate across the country.
Right, and then before Charlottesville and after Charlottesville will take on a whole different definition. Because one of the things that bothered me was how Charlottesville became a noun. And all the time, almost every day you hear before Charlottesville, after Charlottesville. I think we could have an after Charlottesville that made as much noise as the before. I think you all have really pulled together a whole lot of ideas, and what I'm taking away from this is 3 people who I have deep respect for are very positive and hopeful about the future, because I've gotten to where I don't have the news on a lot of times because it gets so depressing I can't stand living. So I think, it was really helpful to hear this very positive dialogue and very thoughtful of how we can move forward. It seems to me we need to start on this journey, which is definitely a journey just with our friends, our families, one-on-one. It's a long road, I think, to go ahead and do this. It reminds me when I first got here, the first thing I did was take around postcards to my entire neighborhood to get a commitment to sell to anybody. And they didn't all like that. Got labeled pretty quickly in the neighborhood. But we've done that. So, we could have stopped there, but we didn't, I think. It's made a big difference. So, do any of you have last words of wisdom you wanted to share with us this afternoon? You've certainly given us a lot.
Well, I'll just say that, I love, celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because he gave us so many words to live by and to look to. And I always like to conclude this kind of conversation with going back to the one that inspires me probably more than any other. It's that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And I think, there's hope in that. There's hope in the idea that you may not know exactly where you are on that arc, but that it's bending toward justice. And I remember President Obama saying it bends because we pull it. And I think that there's both the hope that it's going to bend towards justice and the agency, the action, the responsibility to do what you can in the time that you have to bend that arc. And I'm excited because I know that that's exactly what people in this community are doing.
So keep pulling and keep your eyes on the prize.
Some sayings don't fade away in their importance, do they?
No.
Anything else you'd like to add, Sarat?
I think we're at a good place of closure. I love that. You're lucky you got to it first, Dr. Webb. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I love it. I think that's a great way for her to put a cap on the conversation. And we're all pulling.
I was going to say, I like the idea, but
Right.
we got to pull.
Sounds good. Well, I'd
Thanks,
like to thank you, the 3 of you. This has been a wonderful time for me to listen to some really good conversation, and I know it will be for the rest of the community as they hear it over whatever airwaves are going on. So I thank you very much for this afternoon, and I'll now turn it back to Reverend Edwards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
We're thankful for each of you who have gathered here. For those of you who are watching by YouTube or Facebook, we come now to the offering, the part of that everybody can participate. And I would like for you to know that we can do it by Cash App symbol. It'll be up on the screen. And you see it, Cash App, it says $MLK Seville. And don't ask me to explain the dollar sign in a little square. I know it means it's technologically for some of y'all who are smarter than I am, but but anyway, if you want to make a donation to us, to defray expenses for putting this on, taking care of our sound people and musicians, we would appreciate anything you'd like to do. Again, we thank you for Miss Nancy O'Brien, Dr. Cameron Webb, Reverend Sarad Davenport, and Mrs. Bitsy Waters. Amen. I'm sorry, I forgot to announce the essay winner. Next, we'll have Miss Sue Friedman. She'll come up and you'll see her name and the essay winners for the contest.
Dr. Alvin Edwards, Dr. Katina Odie, and Dr. Bernard Hairston, I am very pleased to announce the winner of this year's Martin Luther King Jr. Essay Contest. The winner is Jakia Maupin of Charlottesville High School. The two finalists, also from Charlottesville High School, are Venetia Smith and Caitlin Hester. We want to express our appreciation to the Piedmont Virginia Community College English faculty and vice president who provided our judging, and also our gratitude to the Albemarle County Rotary Club and its foundation for donating the cash awards for this contest. Congratulations.
And we will be hearing more from our winner at the Ting Pavilion on April the 10th. Okay. Also, I do want to thank the PVC Vice President and faculty for serving as judges, and especially the Albemarle County Rotary Club and Foundation for donating the awards to each of those students. Thank you, students, for participating, and we look forward to your sharing with us publicly. Now we will have a selection by the Martin Luther King Jr. Ensemble. Sorry. I do it every time. I do want to thank all our musicians, thank all of our sound people, and let me say it again, Daniel Hines, Ivan Orr, Carl Brown, Victor Brown, Jonathan Spivey, sound people, Daniil Bryant, AJ, who's on the camera here as well. I thank the committee who's made this all happen and to bring it together. And we look forward to you joining us in April the 10th at the Downtown Pavilion. Now in my closing statement and thought, our theme for the celebration is the urgency of creating a beloved community. And if there's going to be one, then we need some attention to make this happen. So I believe we need a call to courage. That is, those persons who have lived through what Dr. King has been through and others, we need to be held accountable and ask ourselves, what have we done? There is a need to address the regression of what folks have fought and died for on every hand. We need to challenge the powers that be. It is okay to celebrate Dr. King's holiday, but we also need to address the legislation that is aimed at regression. There are economic disparities. During this epidemic, the 10 wealthiest people in the United States have tripled their wealth at a rate of $1.3 million a day, while the 99% of people are struggling to hang on. The middle class is virtually non-existent, and it looks like all there is the haves and the have-nots. If Dr. King stood for anything, it is about economic justice. So this is not strictly about race. It is about caste and class. When you ignore poverty, you invite all the other elements to take over, like crime, lack of health care, and other things that put people at a disadvantage. So I don't want us to continue to dream about it. I believe we need to be intentional about it. We need to have purpose and direction in creating a beloved community. And don't wait till tomorrow, but let's do it now. Because every one of us can make a contribution. Every one of us can do something to make a difference. And so thank you for participating. Thank you for all that you do. Let's work and be intentional about creating a beloved community. Now, the Reverend Dr. Wayne Arneson will lead us in our closing prayer.
Will you pray with me? Gracious God, Spirit of all our lives, we come before you grateful for this time that we have shared and for all those who have illuminated and inspired us in this hour. While we know it is right and it is good to honor the ancestors and elders who have made it possible for us to be here together and enjoy the rights and freedoms that we share, we know just as well that those hard-won freedoms remain under threat in our time. So we pray that the inspiration we find at this time of year in the life of your servant, Dr. King, might be translated and transformed into strength and courage for our journey and for the challenges we face today. If our answer to the divisions of our day is to reaffirm the inescapable network of mutuality of which Dr. King spoke, if we truly believe that we are all indeed tied together in one garment of destiny that has been woven by you, O God of all the nations, then our prayer today must be that the beloved community, which is the destiny promised to us, shall be made real in our time and in the time to come. May it be so. Amen.
We shall